this is not the way, this is a way, but these are the kind of phases that I came up with for, to me, you're a learner if you're still not discipling anyone. You're still receiving, you're not giving, then you're still a learner. I think there's a lot of elders, leaders, I think there's a lot of pastors that are technically still learners because they've yet to commit to some person. We make fun of millennials a lot because when you ask them, hey, are you guys dating? They'll be like, well, we're just talking. No, we're hanging out. No, she's just a friend, or I don't know, whatever. It's like very ambiguous relationship between guys and girls. I would say the same thing is what I see with Christians in, are you discipling anyone? It's like, no, we're just doing this or that. I was like, no, yes or no, are you discipling someone? And until it's a yes, someone could say, no, he's discipling me, she's discipling me, you're still a learner, in my opinion. Leader, once you make that commitment, you become a leader. But you're not a disciple maker, in my opinion, until you disciple someone who is discipling someone. And so I found it's best when you say, I'm going to disciple you, but you have to disciple someone else. There's a guy that, John Tolson's his name, he was a chaplain for the Cowboys. He said there was a radical difference once he started discipleship with the expectation you have to disciple. He said 100% success rate because he said, I'm not discipling you until you show me who you're discipling. And that's when you become a disciple maker, and then you're a multiplier whenever this is the coolest place. I'll actually, if you could go up one, Andy, and I'll find the clicker. This guy right here is a church I consulted. Go to the guy with the picture frame if you can. There was a guy named Scott Dudley, consulted his church in Seattle. It's called Bellevue Presbyterian Church. And I saw this picture on his wall. I was like, dude, is this what I think it is? Like, is this? Because I knew he discipled that guy that he's touching in the middle, Brian Dunnigan. I was like, is that the guy who discipled you? And is that the guy that he discipled? And he's like, absolutely, that's what it is. Like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen a pastor have in my entire life. Like, this is goals right here. This is hashtag goals. Like, I want to be this kind of guy, where that's a metric for me. There's so many churches where I'm like, yo, what is the metric for discipleship? Like, if you have making disciples in your mission statement, but you don't measure it, that's like Nike saying, we make shoes, but you better believe they count how many shoes they sell each year. Or a car company, you better believe they make cars and they count how many cars they sell. Tesla is not organically hoping that they're making cars and selling them out. They keep track because it is the most important thing they do. And I can't tell you how many churches have making disciples somewhere in their mission statement, and then you ask them, so how many did you make in 2016, 2017? No metrics. Yo, we're the only ones that are doing this, and it happens to be the exact thing. Have we ever seen a generation that is so hungry for mentors? Like, with Xers and boomers saying that, and maybe they were, but I can't believe how many times in results of like surveys you hear younger generations say, we want mentors, and they're seen as all arrogant, entitled, independent, but they keep saying they want mentors. You got generations, non-Christians saying they want mentors, and then the one organization that's like the best at mentoring, if you will, it doesn't really want to make that a priority. And their leader, who says, why do you call me Lord, Lord, when you do not do what I say, says make disciples. And so it's a win-win for everybody.
So do you have churches you work with, ones that you feel like are doing a really good job at measuring how they make disciples, other than just
Yeah, there's going blank on his name. One, I think Jeff Vanderstelt is a great example over in Seattle. He's made this a high priority. He's over Driscoll's old church, but it's got a new name. It's like Doxa, I think. There's also Robbie Gallaty in Tennessee. I don't remember the name of his church. I'm going to meet with him for the first time next month. And then, but honestly, that's why I like Leadership Network, because I find churches that are doing something, because most churches will not do something, and I get it, because especially the big ones, will not do something until they see a working model. Even if the Bible says it, they still need to see the working model. And so I get that, like, there's big stakes, and so I'm trying to find the working model. I want to find the working model. Andy, can you go to the next thing? Y'all, I'll talk all day about discipleship, and so I'll be very free to do that tonight. What I want to talk about is another division I see. Real quick, so y'all know also, my passion probably is unity or disrupting division. In my opinion, if Jesus said the gates of hell cannot prevail against the church, if I was the enemy, I'd be like, yo, spoiler alert, like, I know how this is going to end. is the church can defeat me. Like I can't even defend myself when the church comes my way. And so I would think if I can't defeat the church, then I need to divide the church. And I don't think it takes much time on looking at the news or looking around to see that the enemy has divided us by race, by denomination, by geographic location in the city. He's divided us by occupation. He's divided us by denomination, all these different divisions. But I think big ones that are impacting millennials is this divide of generations. But this is a secret division, I think, that I just don't hear a lot of people talk about that I think is heavily impactful to the church right now. And I think it's impacting millennials. If you just give me 1 second to open this up. Let's see. There it is. Okay. This is Ephesians 4:11. God gave us apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, shepherds, and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ. Anybody familiar with APEST or heard of this whole discussion? Raise your hands just so I can get a pretty good idea. Okay, cool. Putting a timer on for me. All right, so let's draw this. Oh, actually, I don't have to. Oh, man. Okay, I'll show it to y'all through this. Okay, so God gave us apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, and teachers. I don't know all the denominations here. I know that I saw y'all are institutional Baptist church. I don't know what that means exactly, but I just know Baptists or Bible churches or, let's just say this. Apostles and prophets are not words that everyone loves. What I'm not saying is that this is a capital A or a capital P prophet or apostle. This is like a gifting. Just people sometimes have a problem with these titles, and usually I do too. And what gives me contentment with these titles is I just remember that it's in the Bible, and it just helps me. Like, it helps me remember that maybe there's something to it. And so, I'm joking, y'all. Gosh, I'm not trying to offend. Apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherd, teacher. Real quick, I'll go over this. To me, I'll go over shepherds and teachers. To me, shepherds and teachers are the grand majority of senior pastors and higher leadership and staff. They tend to be building up the church, or they just are very internal looking. Teachers, most churches that I would assume, if you guys are here, your pastor is known as a very, very good teacher. Most mega churches have very gifted communicators. I haven't seen the mega church, too many at least. There's a very few that have not that good communicators, and usually if they do, it's because they have an incredible shepherd. It's like, hey, he's not the best teacher. He's good, but man, he knows us. He's among the people. He listens. He connects. Like, I actually know him. I have his cell phone number. Because there's a lot of people that go to churches and they've never met their really, really great teacher. But I found that most churches are led in the vision of the church, the direction of the church is very guided under a shepherd-teacher model. Apostles, prophets, and evangelists tend to be very different. An evangelist, we all know this guy. This is the guy that always annoys y'all, and he's like, when are we going to finally go and reach these people? Like, when are we going to go, whether it's local or it's global, they're like constantly, they're just anxious. They got a lot of angst, and they're knocking on your door. When are we going to get more funds? When can you support our ministry? When can we do this? Can I just go start my own? Or maybe they already did start their own. Like, y'all know this guy? Y'all know these people? They have good intentions because they just have a lot of angst, and there is a healthy way and unhealthy way to be all of these roles, in my opinion. Jesus is the full depiction of an apostle. He's the greatest apostle, the greatest prophet, the greatest evangelist, the greatest shepherd, the greatest teacher. I think that in my experience, we each have usually about two that we are really strong in, and the rest we're pretty weak in. And I don't think anyone's as strong in all five, and I think God designed it that way, so we'd have to rely on each other. The rest of the text actually says, so that we would come to the full maturity of Christ and be unified. And so I think that God designed it this way so that we could not make fun of each other's differences or criticize each other's differences, but we could leverage and celebrate each other's differences. But the evangelist is the guy that wants to go and reach the rest of the city. He is an external kind of guy. I found the prophet is too. The prophet is very involved in the culture. Just to give y'all examples of who are these kind of people. To me, an evangelist is David Platt. That's one of the few senior pastors I've seen that was an evangelist. Like, every message had a bent towards we need to go and reach the nations. Like, if it's a marriage series, it's like, your marriage isn't healthy? Well, maybe it's because you guys aren't on mission. It's like, yo, you're going through like possible divorce, go on a mission. I got a bent towards discipleship. Like, you know that Greek movie where he's like Windex is like the solution to everything or whatever? Like, I'm like that too. It's like, young adult, you don't know your purpose in life? Well, one, are you making disciples? Well, you guys are on the verge of divorce. You're not discipling anyone. Like, you're in the hospital right now. Well, you better be bringing someone in there and discipling someone. Like, there's not going to be healing. Like, it's always discipleship for me, man. Like that's what his message is. Like, it's always evangelism, and that's great. Francis Chan has a bent like that too. Prophet, though, I think really Francis Chan's a good example of that in the sense that every message Francis Chan, he's not the difference between a teacher and a prophet. A prophet, I think, I've heard Jonathan Woodward, who wrote a book kind of on this. He said that I think teachers are light givers, like they give light to truth, and they correct nuances. Like Tim Keller does some of that. I think Robert Morris of Gateway is a great example of that. I think Tony Evans does a lot of that. It's like one nuance in the scriptures, and it changes your whole paradigm of how you saw something, which then shifts the way you live. So it's really important. But a prophet doesn't just shift a nuance. Like, I think that Matt Chandler, I think Mark Driscoll, these guys are examples of guys that, like, they don't just tell you the truth. They then punch you in the stomach with the truth and convict you. And our generation loved it. Like, Francis Chan, this is every sermon. I was at the Right Now conference last month preaching right before he was coming up. And I said this, but it's true. I was like, I know his message is going to be something to this effect. He's going to be like, guys, can't we just do this? Like, this is where we're living, and this is where God is, and is anyone else here tired that we're supposed to be here, and all the angels are going to be like, holy, 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 and we need to be right here, and I'm not, don't you guys see this at all? Is it just me? And he never tries to convict you. He asks the question and lets the Spirit do it, but he's like, this is what we do, and this is what the Bible says, and he does this eye, and he does this hand thing, like, and then you just feel like, man, I'm not even a Christian. Like, you're right. I'm like, I am right here, and this is what God said, and this is why God in the ministry is so I can do this, and I've missed it. And he convicts you, and you're like, they want you to repent and believe, and like that's what prophets do. And we kill those people historically. Like they got killed all of the Bible, and so you got to find a strategic way to do it. I use humor. Like I have a bent towards that. Like I use speaking as a platform to just be a prophet to the church. Like I really do, but I use humor. I want people to laugh their way to repentance. Like and then change. Like that. For the sake of, like, there's an unhealthy way to do that where you can crush people. Like, there is, but even Matt Chandler and Driscoll, like, these guys are literally shouting. They are shouting at this generation. And Chandler would say, I was so glad Driscoll wasn't here because which I wanted to talk to him about this so bad. But Chandler would have sermons he called space-making sermons where he's like, I know when I preach this, people are going to leave. Teachers don't try to preach those kind of sermons like that. He knew that it's a hard message. Like, I think we call Chandler a Bible teacher. I actually think that he's a prophet apostle. Like, I think you take Acts 29 away from Matt Chandler, I think he's got to have something else that he's doing. He's an apostle to me. A lot of business leaders are apostles. Network leaders are apostles. If church planting networks, whatever it is, like they are the guy that knows everyone. They like to be a leader among leaders. They like to pour into it. They're big picture kind of guys. Tim Keller is another one. Like I would say Tim Keller, in my experience with him, is apostle teacher. Like I got to ask him once. I said, I asked him how he's so involved in New York and helping other churches with Redeemer and all that. And I said, how do you give so much time to all these other churches when you're speaking, your marriage, book, all this stuff? And he said something to the effect of, he likened a church that isn't for the church is like a cell that isn't for the whole body, it's just for himself. He said, whenever a cell is for its own body, he said, it's like cancer. He said, that's what literally cancer is. When a cell decides not to be for the body, it's for itself. He said, that's what churches that aren't for the whole church are like, is like cancer. And so that's such an apostle mindset. And mind you, why I also use these examples is there's been a tension between these groups for a long time now. And by the way, my examples I used to use like 4 years ago on who were apostles, prophets, and evangelists in the church that were senior pastors, some of the few, have now all left the church. For David Platt, Francis Chan, Tim Keller. And what they don't leave the church, luckily, because they do it in a healthy way because they were pastors. And they love the bride, which is the fault of my generation, is they leave the church thinking that's like being like Christ, but they don't love the bride. And I have to recall that out when we're trying to make Christ-loving, city-changing, church-investing, disciple-making local missionaries, is realizing you can't change the world without the church. Like, it's the vehicle God chose. It's, in my opinion, the only movement there is. I'm a nonprofit leader. I've seen many of nonprofits show up, and then they're gone. Like, no one's looking for Coney today. No one's got an X on their hand right now. No one's got an ice bucket on their head. Like, I know that my group will not last for a long time, but with the short time we're here, I want to be very good to impact and pour into the only movement that there really is. And in our thing, you can't call initiative a movement. Like, don't ever say movement. There's one movement in Dallas, Texas, in my opinion. It's the church. And so know that I have a heart for that, but there's a tension to where these apostles, prophets, and evangelists are like, they feel like the misfit, the rebel, the bad guy, the guy that's not faithful and serving in the church, because he's called by God, according to the beginning of the chapter, Ephesians 4:1, to walk in a manner worthy of the calling in which you have been called. And some of them are apostles, and some of them are prophets, and some of them are evangelists, some of them are shepherds, and some of them are teachers. Tim Keller, I remember someone tweeted him saying, "Man, thanks so much for your ministry. Sad you got to retire." And he tweeted, "I'm not retiring. I'm pouring into young leaders and church planners." He's not. That's one. The awesome thing about discipleship is you'll never be irrelevant. And two, he's able to impact more churches when he doesn't work for a church, but he works for the church. David Platt is more impactful on the church and causing evangelism when he doesn't work for a church, but he works for the church. And then same thing for Francis Chan. He's more impactful when he can work for the church and not just a church. I'm not saying you have to do that. I think that Greg Laurie is a good example of a guy that's found a sweet spot where he can be an evangelist at Harvest America, and he can still be a senior pastor. Does this make sense to y'all? Cool. Okay, so this tension, real quick, let me talk about this tension. I want to tell you what, I'll just say this right off the bat. Millennials, what the heck does this have to do with them? Millennials are connecting, in my experience, with apostles, prophets, and evangelists more than shepherds and teachers. In the last couple generations, over the last 50, 75 years, from what I've been seeing or reading or talking or hearing from leaders, connected with shepherds and teachers. They wanted to show up, be fed, and have things that cater to them on Sunday morning. This generation doesn't want to just show up. Like, they want to go and change the world. And luckily, the church was designed to do that. But the guys that have strengths in that area are usually right now nonprofit leaders, business leaders, entrepreneurs. If 7 out of 10 young adults are leaving the church, according to Lifeway's 2014 research, I would say, man, I wish we could do more research of where the 7 out of 10 going, because I guarantee, with my personal experience, they join nonprofits, causes, social entrepreneurships, they join co-working spaces, all the stuff over here that they're being led. The problem is these guys are usually not Christians, and or they are bitter towards the church. And so a lot of these young guys are trying to live like Jesus, but not loving his bride, and that's unhealthy. And I want to create more like this, where we got to work together. It's like my group in the first year was very apostolic, prophetic, evangelistic leaders, and it was awesome until we were exhausted and we never celebrated anything. And every time we did something, it was like, okay, now on to the next thing. And apostles, prophets, and evangelists just by themselves, why they can become people don't like this, social gospel, because you need to be reminded of why we do what we do. Like, there's downsides when you cause isolation. I'm not saying apostles, prophets, and evangelists are the solution to millennials, because in isolation, they don't love the bride, they get exhausted quickly, they live sometimes off their own strength and their own gifting. They, what else do I do and we do? It's like you can do certain causes just because it seems like the right thing to do, and not because not leverage the gospel and how it permeates into that. But shepherds and teachers, their downside is they tend to not have many unbelieving friends. They tend to like know all these things but not do all these things. And by the way, this is a big problem right now, in my opinion, is not only that teachers are mostly led, and most churches are led by shepherds and teachers, but the very organizations and or seminaries that are designing our next generation of leaders are so structured towards shepherds and teachers. I tried to go to seminary. Like, I've successfully dropped out of college 3 times, starting 2 weeks ago. Like, I just can't do like such a narrow view of what ministry is. Like, it's really hard. I'm not saying I'm above learning. I just found discipleship to be way more impactful in learning. And homiletics, like anyone that does ministry on that left side knows how much homiletics and all that stuff, you've got to learn how to contextualize it. And I'm not trying to just bash seminaries, because I learned a lot of great church history that helped me not repeat the mistakes of the past, like from going to seminary, but I don't see them being the next generation of influencers of culture, honestly. Like, when I go on a seminary campus ever, and just to think of it this way, when I go to meet seminary kids, I ask them, how many people here can you name, how many friends do you have here that are like builders? They build things. They're always coming back off campus. They're like with homeless people or like non-Christians. They're always asking you to pray for their friend that they just shared the gospel with. They're like constantly sharing the gospel. They're just living missionally. They start new things, whatever. Like they kind of have like this voice that's going against the grain here at the seminary. You barely see them because they just really want to be around non-Christians more than they want to be just here on this campus. It almost drives them insane if they could just stay here. They tend to call people out here because they're trying to call them to something more. How many people are here like that? And they'll be like, oh, yeah, I got like one guy here. Or I used to know a guy like that. He dropped out. I'm like, or the professors. Some of the professors are like that, but not many students. So then I'll say, yo, okay, how many people at this seminary do you know that is crazy good at knowing the word, crazy good at parsing the Greek and just dissecting the word of homiletics, and just can teach and like knows all the podcasts and all that? Like, do you know anyone like that here at the seminary? Yeah, like everyone. Y'all see what I'm saying? Like, the next generation of leaders we're training are at a disadvantage of reaching this next generation. So I don't care all the tips and tricks we do. If we continue to be an isolated, or what I would say is not a fully functioning family, it's going to be really hard to reach this next generation because they just have a bent towards apostolic, prophetic, evangelistic ministry. And we have a bent towards, by the way, as this shows, like, these shepherds and teachers tend to do a lot of ministry in the church, for the church. Like, here's how a shepherd and teacher, here's a scenario. You get 3 people that come to your church. Stevie is a great musician, incredible, one of the best known musicians in the city. Performs at coffee shops and big concerts, whatever. You got this new guy, videographer, legit videographer, works at a co-working space. We have one called Weld in Dallas. Dude can make legit videos, does commercials for all these different companies. And then you got one of the best wedding planners in the city, this girl, call her Ashley, and she comes in. They all are good friends, and for whatever reason, they heard about your church, and they join, and they want to. They even, you meet them, and everyone's like, "Yo, that's like, those are some of the most creative people." And you go, and they come to you, and they talk to you like, "Hey, we love the church. We think about getting involved. How can we serve?" Every time, like, this is what most shepherds and teachers think. This is what just churches. We got to think bigger than this. Is like, to them, that's like, wow, this is like so. God, thank you, the King on high, for bringing these 3 people with these gifting. You're good at event planning? Yo, we got this big event we're about to do here in the church. Like, can you please help us? And you're good at music? We need you to come and perform. Please, can you do this event at our church? And then you're good at video? We need you to join the AV team. Like, we want to do these big videos. Like, we want to reach the city, so come and record these things on Sunday morning. Like, and so, again, y'all, like, every Sunday, though, you're going to hear, because we love mission, like, church is not an event, and it is not Sunday morning. Know that. But will you please use all your talent at this event on Sunday morning? Please? Do y'all get what I'm saying? Like, every talent we want to use is mostly for Sunday morning. Then, here's how apostle, prophet, evangelist. If I see that, yo, you're like one of the most known wedding event coordinators in the city. You're one of the most best videographers. Like, non-Christians think you're one of the best. You're one of the best musicians, and even unbelievers go to all your concerts. Can we freaking leverage that in the city? Like, let's do something in the city. Let's get a venue. You have connections to that. Let's get some concert going on. You have all these friends that aren't even believers. Let's do a concert. Or get some that are Christians that can do a concert in the city, and maybe we can do a message, maybe we don't, but like, let's go and do something in a third place that all the unbelieving people are at, and we'll do some legit promo for that, and we can bring all our young adults or all our people, and you get all your people. We make it a big city event, and they don't even need to know it's our church. Maybe they know a little bit at some point, but man, we'll go where they are. Because the idea is like, hey, come as you are. Young adults are not going to church anymore. They don't come as they are. Like, we need to go where they are. And we have the people that want to go where they are. I promise those 3 people, they'd be like, you want me to use my gift to go do that? Like, I can do that. No pastor has ever asked me to do that. You want to leverage this, and you would see this as a benefit to the church? Like, let's go. They will not have to manufacture energy to create that event. Especially if you pour funding into that, it will be a win-win. But again, shepherds and teachers tend to, because they are walking in a manner worthy of the calling in which God's called them, but it is a limited calling. So there's pros and cons to both sides. I'm telling you, I'm not saying that, hey, we need to let these guys just lead the church. I just think we need to listen to them. I think we need to leverage them. I think that they have a lot to give us to reach the next generation, and we definitely need to remove their guilt to make them not feel bad for doing what God has called them to do, because I can't tell you how many, unfortunately, feel that way. Questions, comments, concerns? What's up, man? Yeah, I get, yeah, like, that it is an idea, but then most maybe don't actually feel that way. I think the church staff really loves it personally, but maybe the people, it's hard to get everyone to buy in. I, for me as a young adult, I'm always calling my young adults out. Like, and I'm gonna say, I gotta create a culture where something's normal, and maybe it's not normal anywhere else. There's also a benefit to that, is the people that join feel like it's different, like it's somewhere to belong. And so for me, people with gray hair, older people, they're the best. Like, you're dumb if you're a young person not doing life with them. And so it's like the Sues, the Sallys. Like, I got the people that lead my ministry on my board. No one's in their 20s. Like, my prayer team, they're these ladies that are the sweetest. Like, I love these people. Like, one of them is Mary Grace, Nancy Beth, Paige, Locke, like Jenny, Gilchrist. These are my prayer warriors. And so I need to sincerely love them, like sincerely want them and make them cool, if you will. And everyone else usually is like, has fallen in line, and they'll be the most like hipster little kids, and they'll want to hang out with like these ladies that are awesome. And so it's both in. I wasn't going to say anything on this, but like, just an idea of how to maybe change that, in my opinion. I do a lot of stuff with racial reconciliation. I have a huge heart for that because God's kind of rigged my story to care about that. When I try to bring all my black friends to church, they stood out a second. And so I get on all these panels. It's usually a white guy, a black guy. They let me be the Mexican guy, I guess. And like, I'm serious, and I'll take it, like, whatever. But it's not that effective. It's good. It brings a dialogue. But I've been thinking, like, we gotta go to phase 2 or phase 3. Like, it's got to go past the panels now at this point. And the panels, I'm serious, are good. It's better than before. I want to celebrate every freaking win. But what's the next step is I've been looking at, like, what are movies, and I'm going to tie this racial reconciliation to generational reconciliation. What are strategies we could use? I think that I was thinking, what are movies that have racial reconciliation in it, especially true stories? And it's movies like Race, 42, Remember the Titans, The Blind Side, Glory Road. I don't know if you noticed, a lot of sports movies, all sports movies. They had Hidden Figures. That's another one. But there's 3 elements I found that happen in racial reconciliation movies. I'm not saying in general racial reconciliation, but in these movies they happen to be there. And it's close proximity for a long period of time, especially in Remember the Titans. Every time they have to keep coming back to each other, spend a lot of time practicing or mastering a craft. Or in Hidden Figures, it's like they get in trouble if they leave the office early. They got to stay day and night so that they can get that rocket up. Church is not providing a lot of close proximity for a long period of time. A panel just can't provide that. There are ways, and I'll get to that in a second, but close proximity for a long period of time, there has to be shared goals. All of them had it. Remember the Titans is my favorite example, because on the other ones, at least in Race and Jesse Owens and even Hidden Figures, they try to be politically correct and act like they kind of liked each other, but eventually the tension exploded. And Remember the Titans, they straight up hate each other. Their parents are in on it. They're doing they just don't want it to happen. They don't want this team together. So I like that, because that's the worst tension of all those movies I've seen. And then they go to that camp, and they have close proximity for a long period of time, putting them bunking together. I want men's retreats to be strategically. We want to invite personal invite to 10 to 20 young adults. Yo, we'll pay for you to be there, but you're going to bunk up. Mentorship might even come out of this organically, actually, in this way. But we're going to strategically get you to be there together. But retreats being like that, but they bunk together. I also think finding a young leader that loves seasoned leaders and a seasoned leader that loves younger leaders to be like the Julius and the Bertu or Bertar. You know, the white guy and the black guy that Bertier, yeah, they become like really close friends. That's very important to have an advocate. And then close proximity, long period of time, shared values. And then third, overcoming adversity. I think mission is another great way. Foreign mission trips, you go from like this country to serve this country, but inevitably you come back best friends. You've had a shared experience because you've overcome an adversity, cultural adversity, trying to share the gospel in this community, shared values, close proximity for a long period of time. They just need to be not just young adults, not just youth, not just seasoned leaders. It needs to be like strategically missions, retreats, I would say leadership committees. Being on the board for Harvest America and Movement Day, I got to figure out all these problems in a long period of time with these people, and I've become good friends. All that to say, doing that with different races, but especially doing that with generations in the church, then you build a cohort that is the leaders and the influencers of the church, better if they don't have titles, that come back, and they're organically actually then going to influence, after a strategic time together, the rest of the church, in my experience. Let me make sure there's nothing else that I need to say. This is the downside of taking questions. Oh, yes, I got to say this. How much time do I have? Okay. Y'all, this is my hope for the church. I love church history. I really do. Like, I went to Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. I know y'all knew that. I look like a typical Southwestern guy. You might not know that school. It's totally not what they look like. With that, I really did love what I learned. I fell in love with like Charles Spurgeon, George Mueller, all these old C.T. Studd. Like, with that, I feel like a lot of church, at least the beginning of this 100 years ago, sacred event. You got to go socially normal, Sunday's best. And then guys like Rick Warren, Bill Hybels, Ed Young, whatever, like the seeker-sensitive movement, which I got saved through. So again, I'm not criticizing this. I thank God for these churches. I wish we would give a lot more grace to like the churches that they move from sacred event to a sacred awesome event. Like, we need to make this thing more relevant to connect with the de-church or the unchurched. I was with some of the Elevation team, and someone asked them, hey, what do you think when people call you guys a seeker-sensitive church? And we were in this living room, and he's like, what did Jesus come to do? And he said, to seek and save the lost, right? What's wrong with being seeker-sensitive? Like, that's what Jesus did. And you can have your own opinions about that. I think the enemy tries to use division. I think that's a fire that he started, and I think churches love to pour gasoline on that fire. And the unbelievers are the only ones that suffer. And so personally, I try to find what's the great thing about that, because most of the churches I know that are that in every city are the ones that have a lot of new salvations. Now that I'm 10 years into being a Christian, I don't go to those types of churches as much, but I think they're great starter churches especially. I don't meet a lot of new Christians that just got saved last year or the year before. I get a lot of Christians that went to this church before and then the church before that. And so without these churches, there's not as many salvations. And so I am very thankful for this phase and that there are still churches that do this. And I'm thankful I got my life absolutely transformed through this kind of church. But then I would say more guys like, let's say, Driscoll or Chandler or Francis Chan, or guys that have connected with this younger generation a lot, created maybe more sacred, awesome, but then also authentic. And so notice that it doesn't mean we're no longer going to be sacred. We're no longer going to be awesome. And we're going to add this, like, I remember when I went to the village, when it was like in Highland Village, just like only 800 people. They had candles. It was very ghetto. I remember hearing about all these churches that were a big deal, and it was one of them, but it was so small and so like the quality production was so bad, but that's what they wanted to do, is it had this authenticity to it. My hope is the next church is going to stop trying to be just a sacred, awesome event to turning into a sacred, awesome, authentic disciples. And so it moves away from just trying to create an awesome event and moves towards, we got to create a time or an experience or a launching pad, if you will, that creates disciples. So it changes from not just making this thing look shiny, but using this thing to launch others into the city. Not saying that's happening right now, but I do think, and my hope is as the Reformation, what happened was Martin Luther gave the word of God to the everyday person, and that changed the game. I'm hoping in the same way that the next Reformation is we give the everyday congregational leader discipleship, and that's going to change the game. In the same way that there are businesses that are crushing it at principles that God gave us, and we're just missing out on it right now. A great example is, do y'all know what car company has, and y'all can't answer that, I told y'all yesterday, which car company has more cars across the globe? Like you can go to, I've been to Durban, I've been to Israel, I've been to New York, wherever, you'll see this car there. You don't see Ford in Tokyo. Like you don't see these cars. Do you know what car company has the most global presence? Volvo? Toyota? Aldi? Close. It's Uber. They don't make cars though. You know what they did is they gave the platform to the people. Airbnb is crushing it. They're disrupting the systems of hotels. And Uber's disrupting the systems of cars. I've seen a taxi drive by says, honestly, I'm not going to use the word, but he said, F Uber. Like, they're messing it up. Like, they're disrupting these things. And so this is what happens when you give it to the people. And also the benefit is when your pastor fails or falls out or whatever happens, which we've been seeing a lot lately, all the churches don't go away. Like, what happens is what Jesus did was he made disciples, and when he left, everything didn't change. Do y'all even know who the CEO of Uber is? We don't even know who this dude is. Like, or Airbnb. These guys are changing the game. We don't need those leaders because they gave us the platform. That's what discipleship can do. And I think that's closer to Jesus' model. I think this is closer to the AD church model in that, I know you love this. I love you. And this is the last sentence.
I'm bringing you into my life right now.
Yeah. This looks like the AD
Meet me
church.
at the end of meeting.
This looks like the AD church. And again, I'll finish with the verses. When Jesus left, did everything fall into shambles and disappear? Or did they do what he said they'd do, is they did greater things. They did better and bigger things. Because that's what I think the byproduct of discipleship is you're no longer necessary because your fruit is now growing on their trees and it's multiplying. If the enemy is about division, I think right now the church is really obsessed with addition, and I think Jesus was obsessed with multiplication.